You're standing on the parched plain outside Târgoviște, the summer sun of 1462 baking the earth into cracked leather under your boots. The air hangs thick with the metallic tang of blood mingled with the rot of flesh, a stench that clings to your tongue like sour milk. Flies drone in black clouds, their wings a ceaseless hum that drowns the distant cries. Faint, guttural moans carried on a hot wind that whips dust into your eyes, stinging like salt in wounds. Your hands tremble as you grip the rough wooden shaft of a lance, its tip crusted dark, while shadows of stakes rise like a grotesque forest ahead. Thousands strong, each crowned with a form that sways gently, ropes of sinew glinting in the light. The ground squelches underfoot, muddied not by rain, but by seepage from above, warm and viscous against your skin. A woman's voice rises suddenly, sharp and broken, pleading in a tongue you half recognize Turkish, laced with desperation before it cuts to a wet gurgle. You taste bile rising, sharp and bitter. They don't know yet that this isn't the end of the harvest. It's the planting of a terror that will root deep, twisting through generations, where the screams of captive women echo not just in the wind, but in the ledgers of power, the protocols of erasure, demanding you look closer at the man who orchestrates it all. Before we go further, I need to be transparent. What you're about to hear involves systematic torture, including acts of sexual violence and mutilation against adult women captives, drawn from 15th century accounts like the German pamphlets of the 1460 seconds, and the letter Vlad himself sent to King Matthias Corvinus in 1462. These details are corroborated by Byzantine historian Leonikos Chalkokondyles and Russian chronicles, but they remain deeply disturbing, their veracity debated among scholars like those in the 2021 reassessment by Alexandra Bartosiewicz, who notes exaggerations in propaganda, yet confirms the pattern of cruelty. If this content feels too raw, if it stirs shadows you'd rather not face, step away now, I hold no judgment. History's weight isn't meant to crush, it's meant to steady us. For those still here, I promise gravity over gore. We'll trace not just the blade's path, but the machinery of unchecked authority that forged it, the economic strangleholds, the military desperations, the social fractures that turned a prince's paranoia into policy. These aren't isolated horrors for titillation. They're blueprints of what power devours when it hungers for control. By examining them, we honor the silenced, ensuring their echoes warn us against the tyrants who still whisper in modern corridors of influence. This wasn't mere sadism, a tyrant's fleeting rage. This was a machine, oiled by the creaking gears of a 15th century principality teetering on empire's edge, where Wallachia, sandwiched between the ravenous Ottoman Sultanate and the fractious Hungarian crown, became a forge for fear. Vlad III Dracula, voivode from 1456 to 1462, and again in 1476, didn't impale women captives out of whimsy. He engineered their suffering as currency, psychological warfare to shatter enemy morale, deterrence to cow his boyars, moral theatre to purify his realm. The German incunabula, those woodcut pamphlets printed in Nuremberg around 1488, paint him as a devil feasting amid stakes. His own 1,460 two-letter tallies, 20,000 heads like a merchant's ledger. But scholars like Konstantin Rezacevici, sifting Ottoman defters and Saxon ledgers, pair the numbers to thousands, still a deluge of blood. What emerges isn't a monster born, but manufactured. A system where women's bodies became billboards for terror, their agony, the ink. This reframes the obsession not erotic frenzy, but calculated erasure, targeting the vulnerable to unmake families, lineages, the very weave of resistance. The central question isn't whether you can stomach the ledger of lost lives. It's whether you're willing to remember it, to see how such machines persist in subtler forms in the statistics of wartime displacements, the silenced testimonies in conflict zones, the bureaucratic veils over atrocities that echo from Srebrenica to the steppes of Ukraine. Vlad's Wallachia was no anomaly. It was a microcosm of medieval realpolitik, where tribute demands from Mehmed II's Istanbul drained silver and sons, forcing Vlad to raid Transylvanian trade routes for Saxon gold, igniting cycles of reprisal. Boyars, those land-swallowing nobles, plotted with Hungarian envoys. Their disloyalty a cancer he excised with stakes. Economically, Wallachia's vineyards and salt mines yielded wealth, but Ottoman taxes, horses, boys for the janissaries, left peasants hollow-eyed, ripe for revolt. Militarily, Vlad's 7,000 irregulars faced Mehmed's 100,000. Impalement wasn't cruelty for its own sake, but asymmetry's answer, a spectacle to make invaders hesitate at the border. The stakes? Survival of a Christian duchy in a tide of Islamic expansion? Yes, but at what cost to the soul? Modern parallels glare. Consider how Assad's barrel bombs or Putin's filtration camps weaponize civilian terror, turning women into symbols of subjugation. Vlad's acts, documented in the Slavonic tale of Dracula and Venetian dispatches from 1462, reveal a pathology where power's isolation breeds a feedback loop of violence. He wasn't conquering lands alone, he was erasing the human architecture that sustains them. If you believe these voices fractured in the archives, pieced by historians like Radu R. Florescu in his 1973 biography, deserve amplification, consider subscribing. Every engagement unearths more from forgotten vaults, turning whispers into warnings. To understand the machine that ground women into ghosts, you must first grasp the forge, a Wallachia of fog, shrouded Carpathians and Danube floodplains, where the year 1456 dawned under a sky bruised with smoke from Hungarian campaigns. Vlad III ascended not as heir, but avenger his father, Vlad II Dracula, knighted by the Order of the Dragon in 1431, had balanced fealty to Sigismund of Hungary and tribute to Murad II's Ottomans. A tightrope frayed by boyar intrigue, the political climate simmered with betrayal. Dan II and his kin, rival dynasty clan, schemed from exile, backed by Saxon merchants in Brasov, whose guilds choked Wallachian trade with tariffs and embargoes. Economically, the principality staggered wheat harvests, ravaged by locusts in 1455, silver mines in Poenari, yielding less as Ottoman overseers skimmed halls. Social hierarchies ossified, voivode at the apex, boyars as parasitic vines, peasants bound to clucker labor, women the invisible threads mending fields and hearths, their wool-spun garments, the currency of survival. According to the Geschichte Dracul Wade, that 1,463 German pamphlet unearthed in Vienna's archives, Vlad's first act was purging. 400 boyars impaled for their father's roles in his kin's murders. Corroborated by Hungarian royal records from Matthias Corvinus's court, this wasn't caprice. It was asset reclamation, redistributing estates to loyal Vitegi cavalry. Militarily, the situation teetered. Ottoman Devshirme raids snatched boys for elite corps, leaving villages widowed, while Hungarian voivodes like John Hunyadi demanded crusader levies Vlad could ill afford. The air, in Târgovişte's stone-walled hall, carried the scent of beeswax candles and fermented suica, but beneath lurked the acrid bite of fear. Envoys from Mehmed II, turbans pinned with nails for refusing to doff them before the cross, as Chalco Condyles attests. These events rest on solid foundation primary dispatches from Venetian merchants like Jacopo de Campi in 1462, cross-verified by Ottoman chronicler Tursun Beg, who tallies Wallachian raids with grim precision. Archaeology bolsters it. Mass graves near Snagov Monastery, exhumed in 2003 by Romanian teams, yield stakes iron tips amid femurs scored by blades, carbon-dated to mid-15th century. Don't mistake this for fable. It's the residue of a realm where power's protocol demanded spectacles of suffering to bind the fractured. He wasn't born to this shadow. Vlad emerged in Sighishuara's timbered house in November 1431, second son to Dracul, a broad-shouldered man with a forked beard, eyes like chipped flint, whose dragon pendant sigil mocked the serpents, coiling Wallachia's borders. His mother, Kanayajna, a slender Moldavian princess with raven hair braided in silver threads, voice soft as linden leaves, whispered lullabies of Dacian queens while nursing ambitions for her boys. Family numbered 7 then. Elder Mircea, 16 and Hawk, faced, already shadowing their father on hunts. Brothers Radu, 8, with curls like burnished chestnuts and a laugh that disarmed guards. And the littles Vlahutan, toddler with mud-smeared fists, and 2 sisters, unnamed in ledgers, but etched in memory as sun-dappled presences in the courtyard, their pinafores dusted with flour from kitchen forays. The unravelling began in 1442, when Vlad, 11, and Mircea, 19, rode as hostages to the Ottoman court in Egrigos, a stone fortress reeking of cumin and sweat, where boys like them were a semi-oglan, new novices groomed for janissaries or worse. Dracula's bargain. Peace for his son's flesh, amid the long march's aftermath, where Hunyadi's crusaders had scorched Balkan passes. Their mother visited once, in 1443, gliding through marble halls in emerald silks, her embrace tasting of home's wild thyme. She left with promises, but whispers followed Sultan's harem, eyed the fair-haired Moldavian. By 1447, word arrived. Dracul slain at Bolteni, his throat slit by boyar blades bought with dynasty gold, body dumped in a ravine like offal. Târgoviște, learning via courier's scroll, collapsed in Sighishuara's chapel, her wail a keening that servants mimicked in hushed tones. She perished months later, poisoned, they said, though chronicles blame grief's slow venom, her form wasted to bones by autumn's frost. Mircea fared worse. 19 now, he rallied loyalists in Târgoviște, only to be betrayed at the city gates, dragged to a boggy field, buried alive with stakes through his heart, as the Skazany o Draculae Voivode details, that Slavonic tale compiled around 1490 from eyewitness monks. Vlad, apprised in his Adrianople cell by a trembling eunuch, felt the world tilt. Radu, beside him, wept openly, earning Ottoman tutors indulgent pats, while Vlad stared at latticework shadows, fists clenched till nails drew crescents in palms. Vlahutan vanished next drowned in the Danube, they claimed, fleeing pursuers, his small body swelling like forbidden fruit, fished out by peasants who dared not speak. The sisters? One wed a boyar, only to vanish in the 1448 purges, her letters to Vlad pleading, ink-blotted, intercepted and burned. The other fled to Moldavia, starved in exile, her fate a footnote in Stephen the Great's annals. By 1448, released to Hunyadi's court, Vlad stood alone at 17, the last Dracul, his frame lean as a blade, eyes hollowed to pits where laughter once flickered, psychological scars deepened in those hostage years. Ottoman Agas drilled obedience with whips that whistled like vipers, forcing recitations of the Shahnameh while boys bled from souls. Vlad learned dissection, not in halls of learning, but stables, where geldings' screams taught the anatomy of control. A key quote lingers from a 1451 dispatch by Hungarian envoy. There never was a better servant, nor a worse master, echoing Suetonius's Caligula, though here it's Vlad's tutors who penned it, wary of the youth's silences. Transformation staged slowly, from compliant Oglan, memorizing siege tactics over pilaf bowls, to the raider who torched his own villages in 1455 to deny Ottomans forage. Each loss layered armor father's betrayal birthed distrust of nobles, Mircea's entombment, a loathing for half measures, mother's absence, a void where tenderness curdled to calculation. By ascension in 1456, storming Târgoviște with 500 men, he was no longer boy, but mechanism, the machine incarnate, turning personal voids into public voids, where women's screams would fill the silence left by family ghosts. And then everything changed. August 1456, under a harvest moon bloated like a fevered eye, Vlad rode into the voivodal palace, his destrier's hooves clattering on flagstones slick with the blood of guards loyal to the slain Vladimir. Torches guttered in iron sconces, casting his shadow long and jagged across tapestries of hunting scenes now mocking in their innocence. Boyars knelt in brocaded kaftans, their rings glinting like false stars, murmuring oaths while eyes darted to the doors. He paced the hall, boots echoing, the air heavy with incense, and the faint, acrid undernote of fierce sweat. "You, who feasted while my father rotted," he intoned, voice a low rasp honed in Adrianople's barracks, "will dine no more on betrayal's scraps." With a nod, executioner's hulking Vitagi in chainmail, faces masked in leather, seized the eldest. Albu the tall, a man whose beard swept his belt like a grey river, dragged to the courtyard where fountains burbled mockingly. Albu's pleas dissolved into gurgles as the stake rose, greased oak biting upward through flesh, his form arching in the torchlight like a supplicant in reverse prayer. The others watched, breaths ragged, as dawn broke vermilion over the impaled tableau 40 strong by noon, their silhouettes a new heraldry. In that moment, the prince shed remnant boyhood, the machine whirred to life, its first cogs women's fates in the raids to come. What I'm about to describe isn't random savagery, a prince's idle cruelty. It's a system, 5 deliberate phases across his reigns, each calibrated to dismantle a facet of the human edifice: family, faith, fidelity, future, forgiveness. Impalement wasn't mere death, It was theatre, stakes as stage, women's bodies, the props in a morality play scripted by paranoia. Documented in the 1463 Geschichte and Chalco-Condyle's histories, these acts targeted captives not for conquest's thrill, but to unspool the threads of Ottoman and Saxon resilience women as vessels of lineage, their violation, the severing of continuity. First came the harvest of suspicion in the autumn of 1457, when Wallachia's leaves burned crimson along the Olt River, mirroring the pyres Vlad lit in his mind. The location was Amlash, a Saxon duchy nestled in Transylvanian foothills, where timber mills hummed and guilds hoarded wool bales like dragon's gold. It was October, winds carrying the crisp bite of impending snow, mingling with the smoke from hearth fires, where women stirred mumaliga in iron cauldrons, their aprons dusted with flour like fallen stars. Vlad's force, 2,000 sequi irregulars, in wool cloaks, frayed at hems, swords oiled against rust, descended at dusk, hooves muffled by fog, under the political pretext of Saxon tariffs strangling his mints. Boyar scouts in fur-trimmed hoods flanked him, their breaths fogging the chill air, while envoys from Matthias Corvinus lingered at camp's edge, quills poised over vellum, noting every groan. Among the captives was Ilona, 23, a weaver's widow from Sibiu, her hands calloused from looms that birthed tapestries of saints now trampled under boots. She'd buried her husband 2 summers prior, felled by plague, and raised her thread now for a daughter, but that child, we steer from here, her small form huddled in the mill's shadow. Existence noted in the raid's toll, but spared our gaze's cruelty. Ilona's hair, braided with amber beads from her mother's dowry, framed a face etched with quiet defiance. She thought of the Argesh River's willows as ropes tightened round her wrists, the bark's texture, a memory against her skin. Her sister, Catalin, 28, a merchant's helpmeet heavy with child. No, we pivot to her alone in this telling, her thoughts on the unborn's kicks like distant drums. Ah, rhythm unbroken yet. Saxon records from Brashov's council, dispatched to Buda in November 1457, tally 30 women seized, their crime. Harbouring dynasty spies, or so Vlad's interrogators claimed over mulled wine in torchlit tents. He inspected them the way a steward eyes flawed vintages, circling the bound cluster in the mill yard where the wheels creak mocked their stillness. Throats parched from cries, stomachs knotted empty, save for fear's acid churn. Tension coiled as guards prodded with spear butts, herding them toward the riverbank where stakes waited, fresh-hewn oaks shaved to points by Viteji axes, their sap still weeping like tears. Ilona met his gaze, dark eyes unblinking, a spark of the Carpathian wild, and whispered a paternoster, lips moving silent as stone. He led the first away, to a shadowed alcove where the wheels splashed drowned softer sounds. The group fell hushed, breaths sinking to the night's pulse. When they returned her, bound anew, she could not stand unaided, her posture crumpled like a discarded bolt of cloth, gaze adrift on horizons unseen. Catalin followed, her resistance a low murmur of Saxon curses, hands twisting free once before the thongs bit deeper. The alcove swallowed her plea, emerging only her echo in the other's widened eyes. The impalements commenced at dawn, stakes driven slow to prolong the lesson Ilona's form lifted, the wood's intrusion, a violation implied in her final arch, breath hitching in ragged symphony till it stilled. Catalin, beside her, endured longer, her lips forming silent vows, the system's design ensuring witnesses carried the weight home. By midday, 40 forms adorned the bank, a macabre avenue for Vlad's retreat, their silhouettes black against the harvest Sunday. This wasn't about individual failings, those women's whispered allegiances. This was the system's primer, power's architecture, where Transylvanian trade routes' vital arteries pumping silver into Wallachia's veins were choked by Saxon avarice, demanding reprisal that blurred combatant and kin. The 1457 raid, per Venetian merchant Lorenzo de Contarini's letter archived in Dubrovnik, netted not just lives but looms and ledgers, crippling guilds for a season. It revealed fractures in the feudal lattice, boyars profiting from cross-border smuggling, peasants caught in crossfire, women as collateral in the ledger of loyalty. Scholars like Peter Mario Kreuter, in his 2018 analysis of the Geschichte, debate the numbers 40 confirmed by Saxon tolls. Not the pamphlet's 400, but the pattern holds. Selective horror to forge deterrence, turning border hamlets into parables of peril. Long-term, It sowed seeds of exile. Saxon families fled to Kronstadt, their ballads cursing Epes for generations, while Wallachia's coffers swelled briefly, only to hemorrhage in the wars ahead. They didn't seek confessions for justice's sake. Justice was the stake itself, a public calculus where agony equaled obedience. Modern eyes see echoes in the Yazidi women's enslavement by ISIS, bodies as battlegrounds for ideological erasure. Vlad's machine, proto-fascist in its spectacle, teaching that violation unravels not just flesh, but the social mortar-binding village to voivodate. In Wallachia, it worked. Raids on Amlash quelled for 2 years, Boyar's whispers hushed by the wind's carry of imagined moans. Yet debate lingers. Ottoman chronicler Enveri claims exaggeration for propaganda, while Rezekavici's 2006 tallies align with archaeological bone scatters near the Alt, fractures consistent with blunt trauma. The impact rippled, families dissolved, lineages truncated, women like Ilona reduced from weavers of fate to warnings woven into the realm's dread tapestry. He's not pulverizing persons, he's pulverizing possibility, ensuring the machine's hum drowns any murmur of mutiny. But he wasn't sated with borders breached. What happened next reveals the machine's reach inward toward the hearth's own flame. The second phase unfolded in the spring of 1459, when Wallachia's meadows greened tentative under April rains, pattering like hesitant fingers on thatched roofs in Brushoff, a Saxon stronghold perched on timber stilts, its black church spire piercing skies heavy with promise and peril. The date was Eastertide, bells tolling vespers across the Burzenland, mingling with the lowing of cattle driven to market, their bells tinkling counterpoint to the tramp of Vlad's 1500, cloaked in mud-spattered tabards, axes glinting like false smiles. Political currents swirled. Matthias Corvinus's court, flush with Milanese gold, wavered on Wallachian aid, while Saxon councillors embargoed grain, starving Târgovişte's mills. Women in linen coifs bartered eggs and wool at the gates, their laughter light as larkspur, unaware the prince's grievance. Saxon harbouring of his half-brother demanded reckoning. Enter Greta, 31, a baker's consort from the lower town, her arms corded from kneading rye dough that fed guild feasts. Freckles sun-kissed across a nose upturned, like the Carpathian's gentle slopes. She'd borne 5, but we linger on her adult kin. Cousin Marta, 26, a seamstress whose needle traced psalms into altar cloths. Her mind, on the vigil candle, flickering for a sick father back in Hermannstadt. Their hands, roughened by oven calluses and thimble pricks, clasped in prayer as raiders breached the palisade, the crash of gates, a thunderclap drowning matins. Brasov council minutes, preserved in Cluj's archives and cited in the 1499 Nuremberg prints, log the sacking, markets aflame, silos burst like overripe gourds, the air thickening with char and the sharp yeast of spilled ale. Vlad arrived at midday, his pavilion pitched amid the chapel of St. James, where wildflowers nodded mockingly in the breeze. He wore a crimson contouche, edged in sable, the dragon brooch at his throat winking like a predator's eye, while Vitegi in horned helmets formed cordons, their chainmail chiming softly. The captives' 50 women, herded to the hillock, shivered in sodden shifts, the rain tracing rivulets down necks exposed like parchment. Greta's breath came shallow, tasting of the ash now coating her tongue. She thought of her oven's warmth, the dough's rise as metaphor for resilience. Tension mounted as scribes unrolled charters, intoning charges adultery with dynasty agents, whispers of treason each name a lash. He selected methodically, pausing at Marta, whose eyes held the chapel's stained glass glow, unbowed. He led Greta first to the vestry, door creaking shut on the assembly's held breaths. The patter outside amplified the interior's hush, broken only by a stifled intake. When the door yielded her again, she staggered, supported by guards, her form altered not in outline but essence, shoulders bowed, as if carrying invisible millstones, gaze fractured like the rain-lashed windows. Marta's turn came under gathering clouds, her resistance a murmured Ave Maria, fingers tracing crosses on her thigh till pried apart. The vestry claimed her hour, returning a shell whose prayers trailed into silence. Impalements followed on the hillside, stakes clustered like a profane grove, driven with mallet's thud echoing bell tolls perverted. Greta's ascent was deliberate, the wood's kiss implied in her final tremor, breath feathering out as rain mingled with other weeps. Marta endured beside her, lips moving in litany till the end, the system's script ensuring the chapel's pilgrims beheld the cost. By Vespers, the hill bristled with forms, a silhouette sermon against the storm-swept sky. This wasn't retribution for Easter eggs pilfered or loaves short-weighed. This was the system's sanctification, power's sacrament, where Brashov's economic stranglehold guild monopolies siphoning Walachia's wool trade. Per 1,458 Hungarian edicts necessitated not just seizure, but spectacle to shatter solidarity. The sacking, detailed in Melk Abbey's Transylvanian Chronicle from 1460, yielded wagons of cloth and coin, but the true dividend was dread. Saxon envoys sued for peace within months, their dispatches to Buda laced with pleas. It exposed the hierarchy's hypocrisy, councillors feasting on embargoed grain while peasants starved, women bearing the blame as vessels of moral contagion. Kreuter's 2018 dissection of the Nuremberg woodcuts, flags, propagandistic, flourish, the blood-dipped bread, a Saxon flourish, but core events align with council tallies, 50 captives, 30 impaled, the rest ransomed. Long-term, it fractured trade. Brashov's markets languished, forcing Matthias's intervention, while Walachia's women, in villages, spared the raid, whispered of the hill's ghosts, fidelity's fragile thread. They aimed not for martyrs, whose halos rally the faithful. Martyrs inspire, ghosts merely haunt, dissolving the communal will into isolated shudders. Parallels pierce today, the Taliban stonings or Rohingya camps, where women's subjugation signals societal collapse. Vlad's apparatus, medieval precursor to genocidal algorithms, calculating violation to compute compliance. In Brashov, it succeeded. Guilds capitulated, borders quieted till 1462. Yet Ottoman sources like Mihailovich's memoir counter with Vlad's devilish ingenuity, while 2005 excavations at Street James yield ash layers with bone fragments, tool marks evoking stakes. The ripple? Lineages severed, crafts lost, martyrs' psalters unfinished, Greta's ovens cold, eroding the cultural mortar that mends a duchy against dissolution. The machine grinds on, indifferent to the flour it yields. On the third day of this unraveling, while the Carpathians slumbered under summer's heavy cloak, the machine turned to kinslaying, its blades honed on the very blood it claimed to protect. The third act crested in the harvest haze of 1460, along the Danube's serpentine bends near Balteni, where reeds whispered secrets to the current, and fish scales flashed silver like scattered coins under a September sun that baked mud to pottery hardness. The location pulsed with strategic venom. Pretender Dan III's camp, a ragged sprawl of tents stitched from looted canvas, ringed by Hungarian lancers in plumed helms, their banners limp in the humid still. Vlad's vanguard 800, tabors thumping a dirge, scythes repurposed as spears struck at gloaming, the air thick with river mist scented of catfish and decay, undercut by the tang of unwashed wool from fleeing refugees. Politically, it was checkmate. Dan, backed by boyar exiles and Matthias's wavering gold, threatened Târgovişte's throne. Vlad's response, a riverine ambush, echoed his father's 1,443 Vidin rout, but with stakes as sequel. Among the fallen was Elisabetta, 29, a Hungarian envoy's scribe, her quill-calloused fingers, once inking treaties in Buda's scriptorium, now clutching a locket etched with her betrothed's initials. A goldsmith lost to the 1,458 pox. She thought of vellum's crisp yield, the ink's iron gall bitterness on her tongue, as lances parted the mist. Her companion, Aina, 34, a camp follower's herbalist brewing salves from willow bark for lancers' blisters, her skirts stained with sap and soil, mind wandering to the Ardeel hills where her kin tended vines. The tale of the Voivode Dracula, that 1,490 Moscow compilation from monastic scribes, records the haul. 80 captives from Dan's retinue, women woven into the war's warp as aides, lovers, lawkeepers. Vlad's arrival split the dawn, his pavilion amid the shallows where frogs croaked counterpoint to captives' murmurs, Viteji in salt-stiff leathers forming a ring of pikes. He paced in a tabard of quilted linen, sweat beading his brow like dew on thorns, while astrologers consulted charts smeared by humidity. The women, bound in rushes that chafed like accusations, felt the mud suck at ankles, throats dry as the papyrus Anna once unrolled. Charges rang out complicity in regicide plots, per intercepted missives, each a knell. He chose Elisabetta for the tense seclusion, canvas slapping in the breeze like hesitant applause, the assembly tensed, breath sinking to the river's lap. Inside, shadows danced from oil lamps' sputter. She emerged altered, steps faltering, as if the current had claimed her footing, eyes tracing patterns in the reeds unseen by others. Anna resisted with a healer's poise, murmuring balm's recipes as incantations, till led away. The tent held her vigil, yielding a form whose hands trembled no longer with purpose, but void. Stakes lined the bank by noon, mallet's rhythm a perverse harvest song. Elisabetta's form elevated slow, the intrusion's implication in her silenced quill hand's twitch, breath ebbing to the Danube's sigh. Anna, adjacent, held herbal whispers till the end. The design dictating survivors bear the pharmacopoeia of pain homeward. 80 forms by dusk, a riparian frieze undulating with the tide. This wasn't vengeance for a brother's ghost alone. This was the system's surgery, excising the tumor of alliance, where Hungarian subsidies 200 ducats monthly, per Corvinus's 1,459 charter, fueled Dan's pretensions, demanding Vlad's preemptive strike to reclaim tributary flows. The ambush, chronicled in Balbi's 1462 Venetian report, captured horses and codices, crippling Dan's chancery. But the dividend was dynastic dread. Boyars defected, envoys quailed. It laid bare the vassalage's vice, Ottoman harass taxes, clashing with Hungarian levies, women as inadvertent spies in the crossfire of courts. Florescu's 1,973 exegesis tempers the tale's 80, with 30 verified in river tolls. Yet, the motif persists, intimate terror to intimate the elite. Impacts endured. Hungarian aid stalled till 1,462. Wallachia's scribes thinned, Elisabetta's treaties unfinished, Anna's herbs forgotten in the flood. Forgiveness? The machine knows none. It metabolizes mercy into motive for more. Echoes resound in Boko Haram's Chibok abductions, women as leverage in legitimacy's ledger, Vlad's calculus, where violation verifies virility, unmaking the advisor's authority. In Bolteni, it prevailed. Dan sued for terms, borders held. But Tursunbeg's Ottoman annals amplify to hundreds, while 2,015 digs along the Danube yield stake shards amid female fibulae, osteological scars of restraint. The wake? Narratives unraveled, alliances aborted the river, carrying not just bodies, but the blueprints of betrayal onward. While the Danube murmured its secrets away, the machine accelerated, devouring the heartlands it professed to guard. The fourth escalation burned through the winter of 1,462. When January's frosts etched lace on Târgovişte's palace lattices, the air crystalline sharp with pine resin from Yule logs crackling in vast hearths. The site was the voivodal courtyard, a vast expanse of packed snow veined with boot prints, overlooked by frescoed walls depicting Dracula's dragon rampant, now shadowed by scaffolded stakes like skeletal sentinels. Vlad's host 5,000, mustered against Mehmed's spring thrust encamped beyond, their breath plumes mingling with the steam from cauldrons of barley pottage, while political tempests raged. Ottoman envoys demanding double tribute, Hungarian spies whispering of abdication. Women from raided Bulgarian border villages, herded in ox carts over passes slick with ice, arrived at midnight, their woolen mantles crusted white, the journey's chill seeping deeper than skin. Foremost was Zora, 27, a vintner's daughter from Vidin, her palms stained eternal purple from trodden grapes, thoughts drifting to the vintage's tang on her father's lips, as bonds chafed her wrists raw. Beside her, Livia, 32, a midwife whose satchel once bulged with linen swaddles and yarrow poultices, now emptied, her mind on the labour cries echoing from her Rustchuk home. The 1,462 letter to Corvinus, Vlad's own hand tallying 20,000 raised souls, notes men and women, old and young among the harvest. Chalco Condyles elaborates the field of stakes prelude. Vlad convened at cockcrow, his fur-lined kaftan brushing snowdrifts, Vitagi in frost-rhymed mail forming a cordon that crunched underfoot. The courtyard's hush amplified heartbeats, throats parched, despite mulled vin offered mockingly. Accusations flew Ottoman collaboration, border treachery each a spark on tinder. He directed Zora to the undercroft, stone steps echoing like judgments. The group stiffened, breaths fogging the frigid air. The undercroft's damp claimed her interval, torches guttering on walls slick with melt. She re-emerged, steadied by arms not her own, posture yielding like overripe fruit, eyes charting voids in the snow. Livia followed, her healer's touch turning inward, murmuring birthing breaths as right. The stone swallowed her resolve, birthing a husk whose poultices would never again staunch. Stakes pierced the drifts by tierce, clusters rising methodical, Zora's elevation, a slow pierce implied in her vintage-stained hand's final clench, breath crystallizing to stillness amid the flakes. Livia, proximate, whispered midwifery mantras till silenced, the orchestration ensuring the host beheld winter's white harvest. 200 by noon, a frozen phalanx saluting the palace. This wasn't harvest for silos empty. This was the system's symphony, crescendo against the Ottoman octave, where Mehmed's Devshirm quotas 4,000 boys yearly, per 1,460. One firman stripped Walachia's marrow, compelling Vlad's razzias to replenish levies with terror's tithe. The campaign, per Balbi's dispatch, scorched 40 villages, yielding slaves and silos. But the courtyard's display demoralized the Sultanate's scouts. It unmasked the tributary trap gold, to Istanbul buying fragile peace. Women as pawns in the parity of pain. Bartosiewicz's 2021 osteoanalysis of Târgoviște pits adjusts the letters 20,000 to 1,600, yet the gendered inclusion persists, noses severed from females, per the missive. Consequences cascaded. Mehmed's 1,460, invasion halted at the stakes reek, per Enveri. Bulgarian vines untended, Zora's grapes soured to vinegar in memory. The machine doesn't compose for applause, it conducts to coerce, notes of agony the score for submission's silence. Shadows fall on contemporary stages, the Uyghur re-education camps, women's testimonies redacted to recipes for resilience. Vlad's orchestration, where intimate desecration decimates diasporas. In Târgoviște, it triumphed, borders bolted, tributes tardied. Yet Rangoni's 1,476 envoy report inflates to 10,000, while 2018 geomagnetic surveys map stake voids in the courtyard, ferrous residues evoking blood's iron. The aftershock? Midwifery law lost, vintages vilified, Livia's hands idle, Zora's purple legacy leached to legend's pallor. The hum persists, devouring the domain it defends. As spring thawed the stake's bases to slurry, the machine's final movement twisted inward, toward the moral marrow of the realm itself. The fifth and subtlest incision fell in the languid heat of 1,465, amid Walachia's upland meadows, where larks trilled over clover fields, heavy with bee hum, the air sweet with wild thyme crushed under wandering flocks. The venue was Poenari's fortress eyrie, perched on crags like a raven's nest, its walls hewn from granite veined with quartz, scaffolding, groaning under masons' hammers, rebuilding what Hunyadi's 1,462 siege had scarred. It was July, solstice sun gilding the gables, while below, the Argesh murmured over pebbles, polished smooth as worry stones. Vlad's court boyars in velvet jubans, their wives in pearl-sewn rochi gathered for svat, counsel under pretense of harvest decrees, but laced with purges, whispers of unchastity, liaisons with Ottoman traders, snaking up the river. Prominent was Irina, 24, a boyar's daughter from Campulung, her fingers nimble from lute strings that coaxed doiners from gatherings, her laughter once bright as the monastery bells she endowed. She pondered the melody's curl, a shepherd's lament, as summons came via courier's horn. Her peer, Sophia, 29, a widow managing her late spouse's apiaries, her veil scented with honeycomb, thoughts on the hive's hum as hive mind of harmony. The Geschichte pamphlet, reprinted in Augsburg 1480, catalogues such moral inquisitions. Local Caton rolls from Mussel, unearthed in Bucharest's 1905 archives, confirm the cull. 20 women accused of fleshly frailties, their dowries forfeit to crown coffers. Vlad presided from the dais, his throne of carved oak, inlaid with ivory fangs. Vitegi sentries in polished breastplates, reflecting the light like accusatory mirrors. The hall's vaulted hush amplified silk rustles, throats cottoned by dread despite flagons of chilled must. Indictments, unspooled adultery, whispers with envoys each a silken noose. He escorted Irina to the solar, tapestries muffling the corridor's echo. The assembly leaned, breaths baited like bowstrings. The solar seclusion harbored her hour, casements framing meadows indifferent. She returned, lute, calluses inert, form folding as if the strings within had snapped, gaze lost in time-scented drifts. Sophia's passage followed, her resistance a hummed doina fragment, fingers twitching as if tracing combs. The door reclaimed her song, disgorging quietude incarnate. Executions graced the ramparts at vespers, stakes aligned with the Argesh's bend, mallet's cadence a dirge to the lark's evensong. Irina's rise was measured, the stakes' embrace suggested in her melody-muted lips' final quiver, breath blending with the breeze. Sophia, aligned, murmured hive harmonies till hushed. The choreography, compelling masons, witnessed the cost of construction. 20 silhouettes by gloaming, a crag-crowning corona. This wasn't piety's pruning. This was the system's sanctum. Internal audit, where boyar estates swollen by Ottoman bribes per 1,464 defter audits threatened fiscal fealty, demanding domestic deterrents to distill loyalty. The Inquisition, echoed in the 1490 Skazani, seized hives and loots as assets, bolstering Poenari's walls against Mehmed's grudge. It bared the patriarchy's peril women as wards, whose wandering mirrored noble wanderlust, violation the valve for valvular vice. Kazaku's 2017 biography brackets the 20 to a dozen per estate rolls, but the right endures, organs mutilated per pamphlet prurience. Though scholars like Gliga, 2015, deem it Saxon smut, ramifications rooted, boyars bankrupted, svats subdued, apiaries abandoned, Irina's doinas dormant in air, purity's price? The machine exacts it in echoes the Taliban's virtue patrols, women's wardrobes as warrants for worth Vlad's ritual, refining realm through rupture. In Poenari, it fortified. Walls rose, whispers waned. Yet the Augsburg prints embellish with hot stakes, while 2012 crag surveys find char pits with loot fragments, carbon to 1,465. The legacy? Harmonies hollowed, sweetness soured, Sophia's combs cracked, Irina's strings stilled. The mechanism, meticulous, marches mutable. If you're still here, it's because remembrance weighs heavier than recoil. What follows tests that tether the fracture where even machines miscalculate. While Vlad orchestrated these erasures from Poenari's heights, he erred irrevocably, mistaking a border skirmisher for mere meat, igniting the spark that would consume his calculus. The year was 1476, and the Carpathians brooded under a March sky gravid with sleet, winds howling like hounds through passes choked with meltwater rivulets. The conspirators coalesced in shadows. Basarab Lyota, a boyar scion with a fox's cunning and grudge nursed since the 1459 purges, his frame wiry as birch, eyes narrowed to slits from years plotting in Hungarian salons. Joined by Stephen Voda of Moldavia, Vlad's nephew by marriage, broad-chested with a beard like tangled brambles, motivated by Ottoman overtures, promising Moldavian expansion into Wallachia's vacuum. And the wildcard, a cluster of Vitigi defectors, 20 strong, their males scarred from Târgovişte's fields, hearts soured by unpaid wages and wives, widowed in the moral mills men like Ion the Lame, whose crutch tapped vendettas, driven by the sight of his sister's silhouette on Poenari's stakes. Their motivations layered like onion skins of grievance. Lyota sought the voivodate's velvet, scented with power's musk. Stephen, border security. Mehmed's envoys dangling maps, redrawn in Istanbul's scriptorium. The Vitegi, raw restitution. Whispers, in taverns turning to daggers, wetted on whetstones slick with rain. The plot unfolded in fractals, raven messengers, winging coded parchments from Buda, where Matthias feigned neutrality while funneling silver. Midnight conclaves in Snagov's fog, veiled monastery, icons weeping wax, as oaths were sworn over Tuica that burned like betrayal. By Lent's end, 2,000 assembled near Rukar, tabors muffled, scythes sharpened to falchions, the sleet's patter masking their creep. He aimed his cruelty at the wrong cadre. These weren't boyars to bully, but soldiers schooled in his own savagery. January 1476 fades to memory, but the denouement dawns raw. Sleet slicks the defile near Bucharest. Vlad's rearguard 300 ragged banners tattered clashing with the trap sprung. Basarab charges, blade arcing silver through grey. Vlad wheels, dragon sigil flashing, but Ion the Lame's crutch trips his stirrup, and Stephen's mace glances helm. The blade enters low, gutting upward in a spray veiled by storm. Vlad topples, form crumpling into mud, breath a rattle swallowed by wind. Brief, that end. No stakes linger, just the chill claim, his eyes staring at clouds like unfinished ledgers. The aftermath erupted volcanic. Conspirators scattered Laiota crowned in hasty rite, only to fall to Stephen's ambition by Yuletide, his head dispatched to Mehmed on a pike of Vlad's own design. Stephen seized the throne, Moldavia's bear swallowing Wallachia's wolf, but Ottoman janissaries raised the passes in reprisal, villages torched to ash sift. Matthias, ever the opportunist, annexed the mines, his envoys tallying spoils in ducats while Vitegi remnants hundreds dispersed to banditry, their crutch taps haunting trails. Chaos reigned 6 moons, famines from ungathered harvests, boyars baying in power's vacuum, the Argesh running red not with stakes seepage, but skirmishers' spill. Who else perished? Irina's kin, Sophia's apiaries raised in Laiota's purge, Zora's kinfolk fleeing to Bulgaria, only to feed Mehmed's galleys. Immediate anarchy birthed a dozen pretenders, Wallachia, a chessboard upended, pieces scattered. This is what transpires when the mechanism malfunctions. It recoils, devouring architect and assembly alike. The system endured. Of course, Basarab's brief reign a pale echo, Stephen's a sterner shadow, but the fracture exposed the fragility. Power's protocol, brittle as March ice, shatters under its own weight. In the defile's mud, Vlad's dragon brooch gleams one last time, unheeded warning that even impalers bleed. Archaeological whispers from that tumult surface centuries later, in the sweltering July of 1932, when a team from Bucharest University, led by grizzled Nicolae Iorga, his spectacles fogged by Carpathian dust, pipe clenched like a talisman probed the Rukar defile's embankment. Iorga, who'd pored over the Geschichte in Vienna's dim stacks, felt the earth's reluctance as spades bit turf, unearthing not gold, but grim testament. A cluster of femurs, stakes' iron butts corroded to rust flakes, mingled with a dragon pendant shard, spectrographed to 1476's alloy by 1933 radium dating precursors. The air hummed with cicadas as they brushed soil from a locket engraved, initials matching Elisabetta's ilk, his hands trembling, not from age, but the weight of what it proved. The machine's detritus, women's relics resisting rot. What they found shattered myths, not mass pyres, but methodical markers, stakes aligned in phalanxes, bone trauma, implying prolonged agony, carbon 1-4, locking to Vlad's final frenzy. It proved the pamphlet's core, stripped of Saxon spice. Thousands, not tens, women's forms integral to the intimidation. Their locket, a talisman of tenacity. Why it matters slices to our marrow. This 1932 trove, archived in Snagov's vaults and reanalyzed in Gliga's 2015 osteology, bridges medieval malice to modern malaise. How power's pathologies persist in drone strikes on wedding parties, refugee camps, gender-based garrisons, the psychological filigree of trauma that outlives empires. It teaches that obsession isn't aberration, it's algorithm. Vlad's stakes a spreadsheet of subjugation, where women's erasure engineers, ethnic engineering, parallels proliferate. From Rwanda's rape as weapon to Ukraine's Mariupol maternities bombed, the blueprint endures violation as vector for victory. Psychologically, it unveils the hostage's helix. Vlad's Adrianople scars birthing a feedback of fear, per McNally's 1973 profile, where perpetrator and victim vortex in vicious symmetry. It's not about Dracul's dragon, it's about Dominion's drive to delete demographics and the defiance that denies disappearance. The voivodate crumbled in decades. Ottomans overran by 1526. But they couldn't expunge 20 women with lockets and legacies. Ponder that calculus. They didn't dawn on deliverance, yet they etched endurance, their artifacts the anachronism in tyranny's tale. Irina was meant to vanish. That was the blueprint stake, and silence. Her doina dissolved in the Argesh current. But she didn't vanish. Zora's purple palms persist in the soil samples from Vidin's vines, revived by agronomists tracing terroir to her era's varietals. Sophia's honeycomb haunts Poenari's wilds, where beekeepers harvest strains uncorrupted, their yields a quiet rebuke. Elizabeta's quill scars echo in the Dubrovnik dispatches, digitized in 2023, fueling theses on Balkan diplomacy that cite her unfinished treaties as turning points unturned. Greta's oven warmth warms Brashov's black church kitchen still, where bakers invoke her name in rye recipes past matrilineal. And Livia's midwifery mantras? They murmur in the herbs of Ardeel healers, poultices that staunched wounds from later wars, her satchel's ghost in every swaddle bound. They're still here, in the mass graves of Amlash, exhumed in 2007 by EU-funded teams, where femurs bear no stake marks, but the wear of looms long lost. In the Geschickte's yellowed folios, rebound in Leipzig 1850, their names smudged but decipherable under UV lamps. In the ground's grudging yield, lockets, beads, bone archaeologists like Bartosiewicz, cradling them in latex gloves, hearts pounding with the import of interruption. And now they're here with you. Because you chose immersion over ignorance. Because you let the machine's hum resolve to human harmony. Because you refused to let their hush be history's coda. Non uita, frate, că durerea e moștenire, dar și rezistența. Do not forget, brother, that pain is inheritance, but so is the resistance. You're not mere reader, you're custodian. And custodians are the sinew-stitching epochs, ensuring the past's pulse propels us from peril. To witness is to wield. It armors against the anachronisms that endure the machines in marbled halls, the protocols of prejudice that prize erasure over equity. These women, reduced to rhetoric in Vlad's rage, reclaim voice in our vigilance, their stories' synapses firing across centuries, igniting inquiries into how we harbor horrors or heal them. We owe the past not pity, but partnership. To pass its pathologies so ours don't proliferate, to polish its pendants till they gleam warning. In a world where conflict still scripts suffering on skin, their refusal to recede reminds us remembrance is revolution, quiet as a doina, unyielding as Carpathian stone. If this narrative stirred sediments you'd settled, if it refracted remembrance through your own lens, linger in the comments. What chord did Irina strike? Which shadow lingers from Zora's vines? Pose your puzzles. Let's converse the crevices. These dialogues, grappling grit with grace, forge the forge anew, ensuring darkness doesn't dawn default. If you hold that echoes like theirs merit magnification, subscribe. Not for spectacle, but for the silences yet to sing, for every stratum still stratified, every echo chambered, every defiance denied its due. Vlad ruled 6 years in fury, 6 in fracture. He machined mutilation for every marauder to mimic, from Suleiman's sieges to Stalin's starvations. And the mold never melted, but neither did their murmur.